Snow hung in the air like sifted ash, turning the god's wood to a room of muffled breath and pale light. Sansa stood beneath the weirwood and let the cold bite through her gloves until her fingers throbbed there, small and insistent reminders that the world could still hurt in ordinary ways. The face carved in the heart tree stared down with its red-lacquered eyes as if she had wakened it from a long dream to share her waiting. She did not expect comfort from the old gods. She had learned what comfort cost. What she wanted from the tree was silence, because in silence she could listen, and in listening she could gather her scattered thoughts like pins returned to a cushion, sharp and orderly. There had been ravens 3 mornings ago. There had been none since. The ravens that had flown back carried dark strips of raw wind clinging to their feathers, crusts of frost at the corners of their eyes. They were exhausted and blind to everything but the shallow bowl of grain in the rookery, and when Wolkan tried to tease the message from their legs, they pecked his hand like small hammers. One bird simply folded its head beneath its own wing and dropped over as if it had remembered how easily sleep became death if you lingered too long in either. Sansa had stood very straight and felt strange pity for the maester, who blushed over the pain like a green boy scolded for spilling milk. But even that detail had been swallowed by the cold, by the road's rutted glass hard, by the way the winter light stalled at the edge of the clouds and would not spill. She watched her breath lift in mild gray ribbons. The sound of the castle came soft and clear. A distant hammer, a bucket being set down just so, the faintest creak of the old bridge to the broken tower. She remembered the godwood of her girlhood, how she had walked here hand in hand with her little sister and held out her palm to the snowflakes because she thought if she could catch one without breaking it, she would be rewarded in some secret way. She remembered other things she did not want. She closed her eyes and allowed a smaller thought to take shape. The smell of the kitchens. There had been stew this morning, good rich stew with beef and onions and dried mushrooms and a ribbon of yellow fat pooling on the surface, and the smell of it had wrapped itself around her like a blanket she had not yet earned. She had eaten a little, stopped herself from eating more than that, and left instructions that the cauldrons were to be kept simmering in the hall where hands might find them. Small things, punishingly small, felt against a season that had come on like a hand closing. Footsteps in the snow behind her. She did not turn. She knew them. Those steps belonged to a man who did not like to announce himself and yet never found it in him to skulk. The pause before he joined her told her the news would not be better than yesterday's. "Your Grace," Davos said, and she could hear the dry humor in the title that had never quite sat comfortably between them, like a bit of wool that had gotten into a sleeve scratch. She turned then, because he had earned his right to be met openly. His beard had gone whiter at the edges in the last weeks, and the scar that had always seemed a ragged joke on his face looked more serious now, as if a storyteller had put his finger on it and said, "Here, remember this. Maester Wolkan sent you?" she asked. "Aye, he's with your brother. Bran," she said, and the name made her mouth taste of metal. "Warg dreams," Davos said gently. "He called them visions, but dreams is the word my old mind finds. He's certain." Sansa's fingers curled around one another beneath her cloak. The fur smelled of smoke where she had stood too close to the fire last night. The Godswood was always the right place to hear bad news because it did not flinch. The wind would not slow to spare her the edges. "Say it then," she told Davos. "Say it here." "The walls breached," Davos said, and he was careful, as he always was when the words were hard, to make each one honest and complete. "Eastwatch fallen." Men fled. Some few living made it to a fishing village north of the bay. A boy, 7 bless him, ran them to a boat with his ribs showing through his shirt. One of them reached a tower on the headland, lit a signal. A fisherman saw the blaze and went to find out whether it was a trick of sea light. He found the man half frozen and brought him into his cot. The man talked in gasps and died before he gave his name, but not before he spoke of a dragon breathing blue fire. There was the tree, the snow. The old man with his good hand closed around his hat as if he had remembered he'd once possessed a better hat. The smell of oniony stew still lodged in her throat, the stubborn insistence of it. "Viserion," Sansa said, though it cost her to speak a foreign name with such ease. "The dead dragon." "I," Davos said again. and the word was the sound a rope makes against a capstan, simple and worn but strong. I'd not care to meet blue fire. I've met the green, and it was enough. Sansa nodded once. Her mind was already moving, tallying, adjusting. The wall had stood and stood, had become a piece of language rather than a piece of weathered stone and old sorcery. A way of saying that the North was the North and the rest was everything else. She had not believed it was safe. She had known better than that. But there was a difference between knowing that an old promise is brittle and seeing the promise shivered to powder. A letter is a letter until you burn it. Then it is ash and memory is only what you can keep. "Where's John?" she asked, not because she did not know, but because saying it would make the next part begin. "In the training yard, if he hasn't worn it to a trough by now," Davos said. "He's been there since the dark softened. Swords in men's hands and the thumping of the wooden pell beat like a heart." He heard Bran's first word. "Through the hall and came out with no cloak. I had to send a lad to bring him one, or he'd have broken his hand on the cold iron before winter did the job." She looked up into the branches of the weirwood and saw the small clots of snow gathered there, a pure white that would darken when it melted. "Bring him to the great hall," she said. "Bring the lords you can find. Bring Lina Mormont and Lord Glover. Send for Alice Karstark if she is within the walls and not out on her duties. Send for Maester Wolken. Send for—" She stopped. The names had a taste. Some of them tasted like old betrayal, some like old bread. She did not want old bread. "Send for the men who have to carry bowls to mouths," she said. "The head cook, the woman who issues the salt, the stable master." "As you like," Davos said. He looked at her with that steady regard that did not flatter and did not condemn. She thought sometimes that if she could have cut it out and pinned it to the mantelpiece like a good polished plate, she might have done it, just to have a thing made of honesty. "Davos," she said as he turned. "Thank you." He inclined his head. "For telling you what you don't want? For doing it as if you believe I can use it." She watched him go, his shoulders rounded against nothing physical that she could see. And then she reached into her glove and pinched the web of flesh between forefinger and thumb until the sharpness brought her back fully into her body. The skin there would bruise later, small and easy to hide. Good. She wanted a reminder that this day had a starting point. Snow eddied. A raven called once from the rookery tower, a complaint that sounded like the last sentence of a letter. John had been in the yard long enough to forget his own feet. He felt his legs as tools, as things that could be put to work and trusted for that work. When he held the sword, the weight of it told him where his hands were and what his hands were for. Sweat had cooled and glazed, turned brittle against the cold. He had broken a chip from the rim of his thumb when he'd missed the angle of a parry, and the flat of the practice blade had scuffed the post hard. He tasted blood in his mouth, and it tasted no different for being his. The men had watched it first, some with their jaws set, some with their eyes wandering like birds trying to decide which wind to accept. After a while they picked up blades themselves, some iron, some wood, and fell into pairs, thudding against one another, the sound of honest labor that had always made him feel less alone. Tormund had come to the yard and stood as if the north had grown a second mountain and it had chosen not to throw stones. The wildling had an old scar under his left ear that went white when he smiled, and he smiled then. But the smile seemed to be trying to bite. "You can cleave wood all day, Crow," Tormund had said. "But if the forest walks, you'll need kindling from somewhere else." John had nodded and swung again and again. It was not stubbornness. It was a way to make the pieces in him line up with one another. When Davos came into the yard, John knew the news before the man's mouth opened. Knew it as a taste and a weight and a sinking in the gut that had nothing to do with fear. Fear had more edges than this. This was like stepping onto a set of stairs that had always been there and finding that the next step was gone and the place where it should be was filled with cold air. He dropped the practice blade and caught it before it could bite the packed snow. He wiped his palm reflexively against his breeches and felt the wet chill there. He smiled at the men, at Tormund, at the boy whose nose ran and had not noticed it. He remembered the boy's name, and saying the name steadied him further, as if the name were a strap that he could pull tight across a load and keep it from shifting. "Lords in the hall," Davos said. and there was a touch of apology in the words. "Good," John said. "Good that there are halls left in which to speak." He let Ghost rub against his thigh and closed his fingers in the thick pelt because it was a thing he could keep. The direwolf's breath steamed. The yard steamed with it, the trace of life fighting the air. He went out with Davos, Tormund falling in beside them, and the men went back to thudding, because that was what men did. Thudded against whatever was before them and trusted that it was better than standing still. The great hall had been warmed already by the stew, by bodies, by careful fires that did not gobble wood too quickly. Sansa stood near the dais, not upon it, and that choice said more than anything else about how this would go. Lyanna Mormont had a place at a table where her feet touched the rung. She looked like a child until she lifted her chin. Lord Glover's face had gone red and pale and red again in a pattern that made John think of a man arguing with himself in a mirror. Alice Karstark came in with snow on her hair and did not shake it off, and when she caught John's eye she gave him the ghost of a smile that was as much for herself as for him. The head cook stood behind the last bench with her arms folded across her stomach, as if she could keep the hunger of the world away with the crook of her elbows. And Sansa had been right to bring her there because the woman wore her responsibility like a sack of flour, and that was how the North would live. He took the place Sansa left for him, not far from her, and he did not allow himself to look for Bran because did not want to discover that Bran had been and gone, or had not come, or was sitting in the shadows like an old man with all his years stacked behind him. He listened. He watched the faces. Sansa gave them the news with care and without adornment. She did not say the words to shock but to set. Eastwatch, breached, blue fire, men dead and dead again. She mentioned the fisherman and the boy. She did not tell them the boy's name because she did not have it. John felt a small pain about that. A prickle like a wool thread draggled across skin. Names mattered. He had learned that in the old way, but he had learned it. He would get the boy's name. He would find it and say it to himself in a corner somewhere when no one needed him to hold up a roof with his shoulders. "We'll call the banners," Lord Glover said immediately, and John heard the sound of the man talking to his own fear and dressing it in pride. "We'll give them the steel from our fields and the men from our cups. We'll meet them at Moat Cailin." "They do not cross the neck," Lyanna said with a flat finality. "They do not go into your fields. They go to where the people are. We are the people, Lord Glover." "Girl," Glover began, and then he remembered his manners and swallowed the word badly enough to choke. "Lady Mormont, the dead cross wherever they like. But to gather men we must send men. We must send ravens. And if there are no ravens..." Maester Wolkan lifted a hand as if he were trying to speak to a cat. "There are ravens," he said, "and I will see them eat the best of what grain we have. But the weather does not serve. I can ensure a message is sent. I cannot ensure it is received. The Manderleys will be digging their way to their own walls," the head cook said, surprising them by speaking at all. She had a voice like a wooden spoon in a batter. "There are fish on their tables this time of year, and they might share, if they can see the water for the ice. But you send to them and you send a cart as well, and one of my girls with bread for their men who bring the fish up the hill. People give more when their own mouths are busy chewing." Sansa nodded, and no one claimed surprise that she would agree with a cook about such a thing. "We keep feeding," she said. "We make it public. There is no shame in hunger when winter is before you. The shame is in hoarding." There was muttering. There had always been muttering. Tormund scratched at his beard and regarded them with a kind of harsh affection. "In the true north," he said, "we set the old outside when their breath no longer made soup. We tied a bell to a babe's foot so the mother would wake when he moved. And when the bell stopped, we told her to rest. You will not like the things the cold asks of you. Keep your gods if it helps, and keep your rules if they comfort you. But when the dead come, you must do what the living do. You must hold." The doors opened on a drift of new snow, and Bran came into the hall like a shadow, remembering how to be a boy. Mira pushed his chair. She stood at his shoulder with a weariness that had not cracked her yet and might never crack her because some wood did not split under an axe. It only bruised and darkened and remained. Bran's face did not hold childhood. It held distance and a thin kindness that made Jon's throat hurt. He went to his brother and crouched with his hands on the arms of the chair, and he wanted to say 100 things. He said none. He waited. The dragon's blue fire cut through the old spells as if they were cloth left too long in the sun, Bran said. His voice was light and formal, like the voice of a boy reading a grave command to men with twice his weight. The wall has been weakening all the while, from within and without. Oaths and blood and the old songs had kept it, but without men to sing and men to bleed. He blinked, and for a heartbeat Jon saw a bird fly across some inward window. The dead came to the sea, and the sea took them. Ice on waves. Spreads. They'll come along the coast. They'll come through Last Hearth. The Umberlands will go down if we don't send men there tonight. Tormund, Jon said, because the name came to his mouth and brought a picture with it. You know, the lands between here and the Umbers. How many hours can we ride in this light? As many as the horses can stay on their legs, Tormund said. Fewer if the snow takes the road as its own. You send men in pairs. You tell the front pair to keep singing so the back ones know they're still there. If the singing stops, the back pair turn around and ride where the singing was. They'll find a hole or a ditch or a drift, and they'll pull and swear, and somebody will go to bed wet and cold. But they won't go to ground without knowing it. And that is the difference between coming home and becoming a story. Jon stood. He realized only as he rose that he was still cold to the bone. We send riders to Last Hearth, he said. We send carts of food behind them, only enough to feed a day. If we send more, we lose more. Send girls with the carts, the head cook said again. She pursed her mouth when eyes turned to her, but she did not take back the words. Some old woman who looks like somebody's aunt. No man will take a cart from an aunt. Lyanna Mormont smothered a grin low in her throat. Sansa met the cook's eyes and nodded, that same nod she had given Davos in the Godswood, the one that said, I have seen you. The hall's heat pressed closer. Men were shedding their hats and steam rose from their hair. Bran looked down at his hands, and Jon had the terrible urge to touch his head as if to feel for fever, as if there were something so simple left in them. Later, when the talking had been sorted like bolts of cloth, when Davos had sent boys running with their arms tight to their flanks so that they would not spill instructions from their pockets, when the pots had been carried forward and the bread delivered to hands, Jon found Sansa near the doorway to the solar. She had a cup of something in her hand, and the way she held it told him it was wine, and that she had decided to allow herself exactly so much of it. He felt a wash of affection for that small discipline. We'll need dragonglass, he said in a voice that did not want to be heard and would not be quiet. I should have sent before. The stores at Dragonstone would fill a hold. We sent, Sansa said. I sent, weeks ago, when the first ravens brought the talk of blue fire and long shadows. I told them, we have no coin, but we have honors to grant and promises to make. I told them, if you bring a stone that will cut a cold man, you will have a seat in the hall when food is shared. I told them, we will not forget you. He looked at her, and the ice inside his chest eased in an entirely human way. You do not tell me everything, he murmured. Not the way a king ought to address his lady, but the way a brother speaks to a sister after life has failed to crack them entirely apart. I tell you the things you can carry, Sansa said. If I told you all of it, you would notice less in the faces of the men who listen to you. I need you to notice them. I do, he said, surprised into saying it as if he were defending himself. I do notice them. I know you do, she said. That's why I leave you room. Mira left Bran with the fire and came to stand with them, her hands folded. In the light, her face looked older and younger at once. Older in its lines, younger in its stubborn refusal to be anything but itself. He sees more than he says, she told them when they looked to her for something Bran might not give them. He sleeps and he is not sleeping. He tells me things because I am there to hear them. But I am not sure he knows whether he speaks out loud or just thinks that he has. He said the blue dragon burned a hole in the sea fog. He said the sound of it would never leave the men who heard it. He said one of the dead climbed with nails that went through his own hands and bought himself a handhold with pain. He said an old stone that had never moved to make room for them. John rubbed his jaw. "We've all seen men make a new handhold with pain," he said. "It is an ugly thing. We have not seen that from a corpse." Mira looked down into her palms. "We are going to," she said softly. When John slept that night, he did not sleep long. Dawn in winter was a rumor, a pale intimation pressed against the shutters. He left his bed and Ghost came with him, and the corridors of Winterfell had their old smell of beach smoke and damp wool and those small human odors that do not leave a place where people have been laughing and grieving in equal measure. He did not go to the wall walk. He did not want the sight of the land to be something he would ever be tempted to call familiar. He went to the crypts instead because he needed the opposite of comfort. He went to read the stone names in the half-light and to let the weight of them lay across his shoulders. He went because dead men did not ask favors. He stood before Ned's statue and looked at the face that had been carved to be stern and found it soft because he could allow it to be. He thought, "There is a boy in me still who will always look for this man." He thought, "If I had sons, I would tell them stories about this man that would make them proud of me for having known him." He thought, "I am speaking to a statue and making it do the work now of listening. That is a foolishness I would not admit to Rainey the washerwoman, and yet here I am admitting it to myself in a catacomb." He remained until the cold worked its way through his boots and into his bones, and he could not tell which ache came from which. When he came back up, it was to find Tormund waiting like a broken wall that had decided not to fall just yet. The wildling had a skin of something under his arm, and he offered it without ceremony. "Drink. It's bitter," Tormund said cheerfully. "That's how you know it doesn't lie." It was bitter, and John coughed and felt the warmth press a hand against his chest. "You should have fled like a sensible man," he said. "Gone back to the real north and found a cave and a woman with more hair than teeth and waited for spring." "You never saw spring up there," Tormund said. "When we said spring, we meant find a warm spot to take a shit in the daylight. If spring came to us, we'd go somewhere else to give it room." He tilted his head and then he sobered. "I saw men run at Eastwatch," he said. "Not men I would judge for it. Men with frost in their lashes so thick they were blind. Men with hands like driftwood. I saw a man who lost an ear and thought he could put it back on if he held it just so. You think of yourself as a hard man when you take a wound and do not cry. But when the cold takes you, the hard part is the first thing that breaks. It is like glass. There is a music to it." John took another swallow and felt it go to war against the morning. "I need you to take riders," he said, choosing now because waiting would only make the choosing heavier. "The men who will keep singing in pairs. Ride to the Umbers. Drag them from their beds and tell them to burn the outbuildings behind them as they go. If they cry about their cheese and their timbers, tell them there is no food for their ghosts anyway." "And if the dead come early?" Tormund asked. His voice did not hold fear and did not feign its absence. It held a plain curiosity about a future that was already pressing its face against the pain. "Then give the dead something to remember," John said. "Make them stumble on you the way a man stumbles on a root. Make them bleed their blue or whatever it is they bleed. Make them use strength they could have saved for the long walk." Tormund grunted. "I," he said, and he clapped John once on the shoulder in the way of men who would not fuss if their own shoulders broke beneath a friend's hand. The first riders left before the pale suggestion of light. The sound of their hooves was a dull drum. John watched them go and tried not to count them, because counting made each man more dear to him, and there were only so many dear things a body could carry at once. The gates were opened and the wind fought to get in. The guards fought it without knowing that was what they were doing. The gates closed again and the wind had to find some other crack. In the solar Sansa sat with her lists and her inkstone and the little sand shaker she used to dry the writing before it could blur. She was laying out the names of villages to be scoured for old iron that could be melted down and the names of men who had once shod horses and might still have the hands for it, even if their eyes had grown mean. She was putting aside the nonsense of things like pride. She looked up at John and then back down at the page where she had written Shepherd's Pit. Old Jim, lame now, knows where the nail rods are kept. Her handwriting had changed this year. It had lost its loops and grown narrow, left little room for flourish. The words looked like steps through a tight place. "What did father say?" she asked without looking up again, and John almost laughed and almost struck the table with his fist, because she had read him that truly. "If he spoke," she added after a moment when he did not answer. "He does not speak less than he ever did," John said. "He stood for me." She nodded. "He was good at that." She paused and then lifted her eyes to his. "Do you wish I would say it? That he was not your father?" No, the word was out with more force than he meant, but he did not take it back. "There will be time enough for all the wrong words. Today I want the ones that hold." They were silent a while, and there was a small pleasure in the shared quiet. Sansa reached past her parchment and took up a bit of dried apple from a dish. She bit it with the neatest of motions, like a woman taking her measure of a thing in the market and not wanting to spoil it. "Brienne went to the smithy," she said, as if she were noting the weather. "She says the man there puts too much arm into the bellows and not enough back. She says he's a romantic. He says she's a plow horse with a sword strapped to her rump, and she ought to be in a field where her weight can do some good. They're getting on wonderfully." John smiled without thinking. "She needs someone to treat her like a soldier, and he needs someone to remind him that men who sing do not always last longer than their songs." "Exactly so," Sansa said, and she lifted the apple slice to her lips as if to consider kissing it and then ate the rest instead. Bran did not come to the solar. When he wished to be found, he came to the hall where the living were gathered, and the living had to get used to his eyes on them as if a river had learned to look. Mira came, though, and told them what Bran had said in the few words he had managed after his head had rolled back and his fingers had twitched as if he were trying to catch a falling thread. "He said the dragon had a wound that did not close when it should have," Mira said, "as if time did not behave for it as it does for us. He said Daenerys Targaryen cried out a name and it did not matter, not to the part of her that had already understood. He said there was a spear in the air that cut a sound in half." "Daenerys?" Sansa repeated, tasting the name the way one tastes a berry they have never seen before. "How is she seeing this? Does he mean a dream?" "He sees what he sees," Mira said, "and sometimes what he sees is not bound to where his feet are." John found his hand had closed itself and had to open it deliberately. The loss of the dragon had been an old wound in a new place, even before they had a use to make of such beasts. "If she has lost one, she has two," he said. "If she has two, she has allies whether she would or no." Sansa looked at him over the rim of the cup. He could see in her eyes that she did not yet trust the idea of dragons any more than she would trust a new law written by a stranger. He could see also that she did not think her distrust mattered. "Send to White Harbor," she said. "Send to their harbor master, not to Lord Manderley. Ask who the harbor means to let in and who the harbor means to keep out. Ask whether any ships from the east have put in with sails that do not belong to any house we know." "I will," John said. He wrote the letter himself, and he made it shorter than he wanted to, because he had learned that men whose days were full did not want to be courted by the long-winded. He told the harbor master that Winterfell expected to be obeyed and that the obedience would be repaid with salt to spare and a seat by the fire. He told him to treat ships from the east as politely as a rich stranger at his table and as suspiciously as a man asking after door locks. He told him to watch for black sails, for red, for any color not usually tangled in their moorings. He sealed the letter, put the wolf's head to the wax, and felt a small, quiet pride at the neatness of the imprint. By midweek, the riders who had not been lost to drifts had brought back news that tasted of iron and old coins. The Umbers had not learned from loss. Men hardly ever did when the lesson was that their cleverness was not enough. They had laughed at torches carried by men who fell into the snow to keep them from going out. They did not laugh when the first hoarfrost thickened on the lintels and would not melt though a woman held a pan of water under it and kept the water boiling until the pan was a black moon. Then they looked to their boys and found their boys had already begun to load wagons. Last Hearth would be empty by nightfall, and empty did not mean safe. John sent another letter. He sent it to himself in truth. a reminder written in his own hand that he needed to stop trying to keep every piece on the board in sight and trust that the board would still be there when he looked again. On the third evening after Bran's first word, the tower lookouts saw a torch litter climb the road. The light moved in the particular way that light moves when men are tired and close walking enough to share breath. The gates opened and a group of 20 came through, 6 of them on their feet, the rest on sleds and makeshift drags. Tormund went out to meet them and came back dirty with other people's snow. "Ed," he said, the crow with the sad grin. "He's walked OU. Tea of a dozen graves, that one." He spat, not from disgust but to clear his mouth to say what mattered. "Eastwatch is gone in truth, stone to steam." He says the sound made men think they'd lost their own names. He says there's a bit of the wall in his ear. He says he can hear the old oaths ringing out of it anyway. They put Ed to a fire and he sat there like a log that had been pulled from a river in thaw, water still shedding from it in steady lines. He had a gash along his temple that someone had tried to staunch with a strip of blue cloth. His eyes were a color that could have been gray or could have been smoke. Jon squatted beside him without speaking and held out a cup that steamed and stung. Ed took it and sipped and closed his eyes. "Never thought I'd taste onion again," he said hoarsely. "Never thought onion would taste like the warm skin of a woman. Remind me I said that if I get bold in the morning. Someone might fancy herself insulted, and I'm not keen on being beaten to death with a soup ladle." Jon felt the shock of the laugh in him and let it go. "You saw the dragon." Ed said. He rubbed at his ear as if it clung still to him. "I heard it first. Sound isn't right on the sea in winter. It feels like it's tucked up under your heart and yawning. When it screamed, the sea said, 'Oh, it's you,' and went back to sleep. Then it made blue. Blue has taste. Did you ever know it? Like biting your tongue in the cold, but deeper than that. Like chewing on a coin you thought was silver and finding it's pewter. It burned through what should not burn. There was an old boy on the watch with me who never got through a story without crying a bit on the good parts. He tried to say some old words and the blue took the words up and made them into steam. I was a lad again, just long enough to wish for a mother. Then I remembered my mother used to clap me for being slow to rub my boots. And I thought, no, not her. Then not her, and I ran." He opened his eyes. There was no shame in them. If anything, there was relief in telling it straight. "I ran," he said. "I pulled a boy I didn't know by the collar, and I told him if he let go of his sword, he could borrow mine when we stopped. I carried a man who was lighter than a sack of flour, and I knew him to be heavier than any 2 men I'd carried last year. There were..." He stopped. He made a small motion with his hand as if he were stroking the air. "They came up the water. I don't know how, or I know, and I don't want to say it right. We'll have time for the litany after you sleep," Jon said. "You did what was left to do. That's enough for any man." Ed looked at him and a corner of his mouth lifted. "You've gotten better at saying things," he said. "Lord Crow." Then he drank the rest of the broth and set the cup down as if it might break if he thought about it too hard. And he leaned back against the wall with his eyes open and fell asleep without fuss. The air changed the day after Ed's arrival. People had begun to believe in the way that closed mouths and hungry sockets begin to believe. It was not the way of belief that warms and binds. It was the way that freezes and shines. Men stopped telling the small lies they told at firesides to make one another feel that they were still afterwards waiting. They stopped saying the winter would break early because winter had never broken early in their grandparents' lifetimes and was unlikely to choose now to be kind. They stopped promising their sons new boots in the spring. They tightened the old ones and told the boys to hold like Tormund had said. One lad came and asked Sansa for permission to bury his grandmother with her old pipe tucked under her hands so the dead would think she had died content. Sansa said yes because that was exactly the sort of thing the living did for one another when they understood that the days ahead might strip them of more obvious comforts. Brienne came to Jon with a sword in her hand and a frown creasing her whole person. "This is the best the smith can do today," she said without preamble. "The metal's sound enough. It rings true, but it has no balance. You would be wearing half your strength on your wrist just to keep it from pulling you into the cut. Men will fall with it in their hands and imagine themselves clumsy. They are not clumsy. The blade lacks kindness. John hefted it and agreed. He admired the way Brienne had called the lack by that name. He had learned to trust her for such truths. "We'll rework what we can," he said. "We'll give the lighter blades to the quickest men, the heavier to those who can make weight their ally. We'll tell them before we hand a weapon to them what it will ask in return." Brienne's mouth softened. "You've gotten better at that," she said too, and he wondered if he had been a fool before and men had only been too kind to tell him. By the end of the week, the first letter came from White Harbor. The harbor master had a cramped hand and a talent for leaving out all the words a lesser man would have inserted to make a letter polite. He wrote, "Winds poor, ice poor, fish good. Men complain of tows. Strange sails seen, black ships, gold kraken on one of them, put in for repairs. Master of that ship looks oily. Name given Euron. He has been here before. This time he whistles less. Queen in south held up by nothing but gold. Gold is poor kind of rope in a wind like this. If you want to forbid his landing, send men big enough to look like a dock wall. If you want to let him come, I'll charge him for his trouble." John read the letter and felt a deep weariness settle in his lungs. "Euron," he said. "The name had a disease in it. Cersei's man, or Cersei's leash, or Cersei's dog she thinks she has on a leash," Sansa said, considering and folding the parchment to make it smaller still. "If he has business this far north, it is not the sort of business that ends with a bow. He will bring news we do not want, or he will bring a bargain. We cannot afford. Either way, we aren't ready to keep him from speaking. We will have to hear him. We can double the harbor watch," John said. "We can set men with quiet faces at the mouth of the White Knife who carry a sign in their eyes that says, 'You will not toss your crew overboard for a joke here.' Sign-making should be left to those who bake bread," Sansa said with a sudden flash of humor that knocked time backward by a year. "They know how to read men's mouths." John nodded. He did not want to smile. He was glad when it escaped him anyway. That night, when the wind found a new trick and slid between shutters as if it had learned hands, Bran woke from one of the dreams that were not exactly his own. He cried out once. Mira's hand was there already. He opened his eyes and said, "A woman with white hair stood on black stone and held a coal that did not go out though snow fell on it. She threw it into the sea. The sea carried it like a mouth carries a secret." "Daenerys," Mira said softly, more to mark it than to question it. He called the dragon a word that had no sound. Bran went on. "Not the woman, the Night King. He calls things with silence." The dragon answered, "I don't know how to explain that to you. I could show you if you could come with me, but I need you here. I need you to put water to my lips when it goes away." He shivered badly enough that they thought the bed itself had quivered. Sansa came in then because the cry had been the kind of sound that draws women. She dressed the weight for what it was. "What did you see?" she asked, not soothing him or herself with nonsense. "He will leave shapes for us to read," Bran said. "He likes us to read. He likes us to understand enough to despair. Then we will learn his handwriting and mock it," Sansa said very evenly. She sat on the bed and took Bran's hand as if she were remembering what it had been like to rub warmth into smaller fingers when they belonged to a boy who had cut his knuckles on a stone and been more surprised than pained. "Write it out for us," she said. "Tell us what shapes to expect. Circles and lines. Spirals that made men think of eyes. Figures that looked like roads on a map but were not roads at all." He told them until the telling wore him down to a thin thread, and then he slept, to the particular breathing sound of a child too tired to stir even when he turned. John left the solar just before morning again and found Arya in the yard. She was cutting the air in half with her movements, slicing it into portions as if she could make the cold serve bread. Her feet were sure now in a way that made him both glad and afraid. He watched her for a count of 30 heartbeats, and she knew it, and she did not change anything she was doing to let that knowledge show. He clapped once, because he didn't have a better word and because his hands needed to make sound. She turned then and smiled with her mouth but not her eyes, and then allowed the smile to grow into her eyes because she was generous to him. "You sleep less," she said. "I get up more," he said. "You always like dawn," she said, and he realized that she had made this hour a kind of gift. a place where she could say things to him that would otherwise feel like secrets. "It never liked you back." "It doesn't have to," he said. "I went to the kitchens," she said. "They have onions again." I asked a woman with flour on her knuckles if she had anything left that tasted of lemons. She gave me a face then that would have soured milk. "Lemons do that whether you have them or not," he said. "I know," Arya said. I realized after that she might have thought I asked for something I didn't need. I told her I was practicing being a fool, and she laughed and gave me a bit of old honeycomb. It wasn't much, but if you take small bites it lasts on your tongue for a long time. She tilted her head. "You should eat something sweet sooner than later. It reminds you you have a mouth for other uses than commands." "I will," he said, and meant it. "Watch for men who will break when you need them not to." "I do," she said. "I look for eyes that go away when you ask them to look. I look for hands that wrap around themselves. There is a boy who has been staring at the well in the courtyard, and I don't like the way he stares. I think he wants to drop his name in it. I will find a way to make him forget the well." "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Arya said. "It's a thing I can do that doesn't involve blood. I like to be reminded that there are such things." She cut the air again, and the air allowed itself to be cut because she had earned that, at least. Jon left her to her movements, and the new day came in thin, like gruel. Days lengthened and yet did not. Days were longer to hold more, shorter because they ran. A letter came from the south. It did not come from Cersei. Cersei's letters were those of a woman who wanted her words to leave bruises under a reader's eyes. This letter was sober, plain, practical. Dispatches about supply lines on the King's Road, about the state of the fords, about bands of men from the marches who were ambushing any cart that looked to be carrying yeast or flour. This letter came from someone who understood that sending information north was to send part of a man's life. The hand was familiar, but Jon could not place it until Sansa said, "Tyrion Lannister," in a tone not quite surprised, not quite resigned. "He has always written as if he expects to be seen." "He says his queen will come," Jon said, reading again the words that said little and yet promised much with their neatness. "He does not say when. He does not say how. He does not apologize for what was lost." "He would be lying if he tried to," Sansa said. "Let him bring her. Let him come himself. I have a space for him at the foot of the hall where he can see the backs of all our heads and understand at last that a man's size has nothing to do with where he stands." Jon sat with the letter and considered replying. He could imagine Tyrion reading whatever he sent with his clever, slantwise mind. He could imagine his words being taken up and weighed like coins by a man whose purse was never truly empty. He wrote a short answer. He put in it 3 facts about roads and 2 about weather and 1 about the shape Tormund had seen scratched into the frost of a gate at dawn. He ended it with a word about onion stew, because men, even Lannisters, needed to be reminded about the taste of a thing that had comfort in it. At Dragonstone, the queen whose dragons had been born in fire woke from a dream full of cold. She stood on the terrace where the sea threw itself at the rocks because it had never learned to stop. The wind made a sound like rope straining. Her hair tugged itself out of its pins, as it liked to do, and she let it. There were shells in a bowl on the ledge that had been there long before she came. She picked one up and held it, turned it in her fingers, pressed the thin edge against her thumb. It made a white line that filled slowly with red, and then it healed itself with the wind. The cut was not a cut at all, only an intention. Tyrion came to stand a few steps behind her and watched the sea also, because a man could always pretend to be studying the weather when what he wanted was to study another face. He said, "The ravens from the north have stopped coming. Not entirely. But the ones that arrive come with tiny ice daggers at the corners of their eyes. They look like murderers who have found they are mothers. It makes them irritable." Daenerys held the shell until it warmed to her skin. She thought of Viserion and did not think of Viserion. She allowed both thoughts to stand and not battle each other, because there was no more strength to be had from losing this fight twice. "How many days sail to White Harbor if we leave on the full tide?" she asked. Tyrion's breath made a plume. "With this wind? With this ice? With ships that were made to slip through summer water as a woman moves through gauze? Long enough for you to call me a fool 3 times and my queen twice, if you had a mind to split hairs. But not so long that we cannot imagine it being done. Take care with the words you hope for, Daenerys said, not unkindly. Fools and queens are neighbors. He turned his head then and let her see his eyes. I prefer neighbors I can quarrel with over bread. I will go, she said. The saying was a stone in the path. She felt herself step onto it and gain height thereby. I will take the dragons that remain. It will be ugly. It is already ugly, Tyrion said. Going north will not make it uglier. It will only make the ugliness belong to you in the way that helps a person endure it. She laughed once, and it sounded to her ears like the sea cracked in half. You have gotten better at saying things, she told him, and his mouth softened into something that was almost a smile. Grey Worm came forward into the doorway and stood with a discipline that did not require effort. His eyes were different now, after the empty throne room in a city of bells, after things he had done and undone. He did not ask a question because he did not need to. He could smell the decision in the air. We will go with you, he said. Missandei came to Daenerys later and brought with her a piece of cloth she had been mending. It was white once and had been used to catch sweat from a brow. Now it bore the memory of salt and heat. Missandei's fingers had always been clever with thread. I will write the letters, she said, to those you would warn, to those you would bless by telling them nothing, to those you would frighten a little so that they will stay awake enough to keep the doors barred. Bless, Daenerys said. Do I bless? You will, Missandei said, often with small things that will comfort the exhausted. You will not know it unless someone tells you, and I am telling you. And in the north there are people who have used up their small comforts already. Daenerys nodded and felt the shell line on her thumb smart once more. I will bless them by bringing fire that does not turn blue, she said. Missandei reached for her hand as if to set the promise there and bind it with a friendship that had held through too many trials to be tested again and again. Fire is stubborn when it knows it is wanted, she said. The ravens that carried Daenerys' words north had less grace than the ones she sent in autumns past. They had to fight the air to keep it from squeezing letters from their legs and stories from their lungs. Some of them stopped to argue with the wind. Some won and some did not. One, hardiest, came to Winterfell after a journey that had filled it with a scratchy, triumphant mischief. The rookery exploded in noise when it arrived. The other birds made sounds they had not made before, a note between warning and welcome, as if they could smell on it an adventure they had not been given permission for. Maester Wolkan took the message and closed it on his palm for a long breath before he opened it, as if he could heat the ink and make it brighter. Jon read it and then folded it and handed it to Sansa. It was not long. It did not apologize either. Said, I come if I can. I come because there is only one road left where honor remains. I come with a beast that will either save us or teach us something about how to die. Said, hold. Hold, Sansa echoed, and she folded the letter once more so that the word lay over itself. I read a story once, she said unexpectedly, about a woman who knitted an unending scarf through for winters. The scarf carried all the dyes she could find. There were patches of green there and blue and red, and a brown so dark it seemed to steal light. When she had finished, the scarf was longer than the road from Winterfell to the Dreadfort. She laid it out and made a path for herself, and she walked it and did not have to touch the snow. It was a child's story. The ending was foolish. No scarf would hold such weight. But sometimes I am sorry we do not live within foolishness. We have onion stew, Jon said, because that was the foolishness he could bear. And a child brought me honeycomb. She raised an eyebrow at that and then let the corner of her mouth flex. Did you wipe it on your sleeve, or did you act like a lord and use a cloth? I used my tongue, he said. Some of us still remember how animals live. Good, she said, her face gentled. Good, Jon. Keep that. Euron Greyjoy came to White Harbor with enough swagger to hide the fact that he had frost in his beard that would not melt though he stood by a brazier with a look of a man making love to smoke. He bowed too deeply by habit, then cut it short and looked like a man who had caught himself in a lie and decided to enjoy the taste of it. He brought gifts. Gifts from the south were always things with metal in them and traces of scent that did not belong to winter. He laid out a small casket of rounds of glass that had been polished until they reflected a man's face back at him with a careless cruelty, then set beside them a wooden toy that clicked and popped in a child's hand. The harbor master took the toy and worked it and did not smile because he had learned how not to smile at anything that looked like happiness offered by a stranger. "You will let me pass," Euron said without a question mark anywhere in him. "I have business to the south that will take me north and business to the north that will take me south. I bring a letter from a queen. The queen does not say in her letter that you must obey. The queen assumes obedience. This is why queens die. I will show you the letter anyway, so you can have something to keep your fire going tonight." "Shrug," the harbor master said to one of his men. The man shrugged. The harbor master was not in the habit of performing any gesture the first time without prayer or practice. He was an old and sly priest in the Church of Ships. He took the letter. He read it. He looked at Euron and saw the oily sheen that had been reported to him and the emptiness that comes when a man has used himself up chasing a name and has only the name left, without the man. He said, "If you plan to make trouble, make it as far from my docks as you can. My docks have done nothing to you." Euron laughed. It was a bad sound and a fine one. He looked down toward the place where the water had frozen lightly and a man could have been fooled into thinking he could walk it to the horizon. "I make trouble with the weather," he said. "We do not quarrel because we both want to live. I will leave your docks to do what docks do, and you will behave with respect toward the men who carry salt," the harbor master said because he enjoyed wetting some men more than others. "If I hear otherwise, I will close the latches behind you so tight you will have to gnaw your way back to the sea." Euron bowed again and tossed a coin into the brazier for luck. It hissed. He watched it as if expecting it to tell him a joke. The letter from the queen in the south made its own way from hand to hand, as letters do that carry a scent. Jon felt his jaw tighten when he read it. It offered troops that did not exist and a promise that had been borrowed against a debt already. It mentioned loyalty as if it were a tax and honor, as if it were a debt owed solely to those with golden lions somewhere on their clothes. He kept his temper because temper was a cheap fire in a winter like this. He passed the letter to Sansa and together they made a small pile of wood and paper that might serve as a lesson later for men who needed the warmth. In the nights that followed, the cold grew cunning. It found ways to take the small things men hoard up against despair. It took a child's doll that had been warmed all day in a boy's armpit. It took the laces from a boot and left the boot itself, so that a man stood with his foot in a thing that flapped open like a laugh. It took the color from cheeks, leaving everyone noble. It made song ring oddly in corners, as if the notes were getting caught in a cobweb. The dead came to Last Hearth, and Last Hearth went out like a candle when a door opens. The riders who had been sent were already on the road with the Umbers behind them, a long, weary line of wagons drawn by beasts whose eyes had grown old in a span of days. Some did not make it. Some fell under their own weight. Some had to lay their heads on their own arms and sleep for an hour under the wagon to keep from going blind with snow, and those who slept found that dreams did not forgive. But the line moved, and the black smoke that rose from the Umberlands was a sign, Tormund said fiercely, that the living had chosen a thing for themselves and not had it chosen for them by the dead. On the 40th dawn after the first letter, a cry went up on the walls at Winterfell and 3 black specks were seen far to the southeast against the dull sky. Men stared. Men shouted. Some men went quiet and folded their hands as if they were at a burial. Sansa stood beside Jon on the wall. He felt her shoulders stiffen as if a hand had been put there. As the specks drew near, one of them broke into 2. Then the 2 became one again as they crossed each other's paths in a dance that felt to the watching like an argument followed by a kiss and then another argument. The dragons came over the outer wall, and the beat of their wings made the snow rise in little flurries on the roofs as if applauding. Their bellies were a smooth, hungry color. Their eyes were old and new. Men forgot themselves and reached for weapons and then remembered who they were and put their hands against their thighs instead to feel that their legs still belonged to them. The dragons roared and the sound climbed into bones and sat there like a guest who had come for supper and stayed to tell a long story. They were beautiful. all in the way ice is beautiful when it hangs from the eaves, all sharp promises and the knowledge that enough sunlight can make even that beauty let go. Daenerys sat high on Drogon, and Regal's shadow crossed her face in a gesture that could have been benediction. She let them land in the outer yard because her council had agreed that bringing them down inside the walls would make men feel that the sky itself had shrunk, and men hated shrunk skies. She dismounted with the grace of a woman who had practiced falling hours upon hours. She stood there then long enough for the brave and the curious to gather their courage and approach. She did not speak first. She wanted the North to learn the sound of her breathing before the sound of her voice. Jon went to meet her with the air held very steady in his lungs. He had practiced not holding his breath before and had failed many times. He had learned, in the last months, the trick of it. He went with Ghost at his heel and the smell of onion stew. Somebody always cooking it now. Wrapped around him like a joke everyone knew. She looked at Ghost first and said, "He is bigger than I expected." And Jon found himself laughing because it was, of all the things she might have said, the one that made room for them to be people before they remembered they were stories. "Your dragons are smaller," he said, and watched her take that and weigh it and decide it was friendly. "They are what they are," she said. "We have all been remade." He thought of Viserion then and nodded once and did not say more, and she saw the nod and understood the rest of it. And in that little exchange something passed like a piece of bread being broken and shared. They went into the hall and men forgot for a brief hour the hunger that ate at their concentration. Tyrion came with Daenerys and his eyes found Sansa at once, and he bowed just enough to be correct and just enough less than that to be himself. They spoke plain words to one another, stripped of embroidery. They did not pretend to be glad. They did not pretend to have forgotten. They were too tired for such sport. "We will need dragonglass," Jon said, almost at once, because any other opening would have felt like lying to a hungry man about a feast. "We have it," Daenerys said. "We have brought what we could cut and carry. We have men who know how to work it. We have fire that is not blue." Brienne looked at Grey Worm and Grey Worm looked at Brienne, and two soldiers recognized each other without having met. They saw in one another a particular fidelity that did not need a banner to tie it to something outside itself. Missandei sat near Sansa and asked questions about stores that made Sansa think again that friendship could be born in kitchens and ledgers as well as battlefields. Davos and Tyrion shared a drink and said nothing for a long time and then said half a dozen things all at once and laughed in a way that made other men listen because the sound of it proved laughter could still be earned. Night came and along with it a cold that seemed to be measuring the rooms of Winterfell with a tailor's care, preparing to fit them for a suit of ice. Jon stood on the wall again with Daenerys beside him, and they did not speak for a long time because the need for speech had been spent in the hall and neither of them fancied forcing the world to answer after giving so much. At last Daenerys lifted her hand and pointed toward the darkness where the road hung like a ribbon left outside all winter. "They will come by that way," she said. "They will come by any way they choose," Jon said. "They are not men. They do not look for a gate to open." "You speak like a man who has not seen gates open for him when he did not expect it," Daenerys said, not unkindly, and he turned to look at her and saw that the white line on her thumb was new, and the temptation to ask about it surprised him with its gentleness. "You lost one," he said instead. "I did," she said. For a moment the quiet around them grew more respectful, as if the cold itself had understood a loss and been reminded of its manners. "He fell into a place I cannot redeem, and then he was taken up by a will that cares nothing for the names we give our loves." Jon thought of the boys he had seen die. He thought of the old men they had become in an instant when the cold asked its question, and he thought of a dragon being made into a thing that burned the wrong color and had its name taken from it by silence. "We will do what we can with what we have left," he said, "and then we will see what that changes. Perhaps it will change us most," Daenerys said. "It already has," he said, and she nodded. And the wind passed over the battlements and made a sound like a long breath taken by a sleeping house. There were dreams that night in which children heard bells that had never hung in Winterfell, bells whose tongues were blue iron. There were men who dreamed of hands reaching out of drifts and holding on with a patience that could not be learned by anyone who breathes. There was a woman who dreamed of a field of lemons and woke with her mouth full of salt, because she had forgotten the taste of a fruit that does not grow under snow. In the room where the weirwood sapling planted once as a half-hope half-mockery by a servant from the south was kept alive in a pot with warm stones at its base. A leaf fell without a draft to help it. It fell with a tiny commendable courage and lay there on the packed earth and did not know it had become a story. In the morning Jon went down to the yard and found Tyrion talking with Arya, as if he had been waiting years for such an opportunity and had not decided in advance what he meant to make of it. He listened to them, and he realized that the war his body was bracing for would make room for games of words, and that both of those were versions of the same thing. The living doing their living in the face of what did not want them to content. "Wait, do you think the blue fire tastes like mint?" Arya asked conversationally when Jon drew near. "I think it tastes like a boy's first lie," Tyrion said. "It burns, and if you keep it to yourself, it leaves a scar that no one else can see." "Men will die if they believe your answer," Arya said. "Do not let them hear it." "They will die if they do not believe anything," Tyrion said without heat. "Better to die laughing than with your teeth clenched." "Better to live," Jon said. "Better to live," they echoed, and the sound of the words felt like hammer blows on a blade that was not yet all it needed to be, shaping it, bringing its edge closer to true. By afternoon, a rider came lurching from the east, a man from a village that had owed Winterfell 6 lambs every spring and was now perhaps a place where no lamb would ever bleed again. He brought news of men walking in daylight not because they loved the sun but because they wanted to starve the living of sleep. He brought a strip of cloth from a frostbitten finger, a strip that had been cut to make a charm in better times. He brought a name for a boy, Harry, son of Harry, who had lit the beacon and then died before his name could be taken down by a maester's hand. Jon took the name and said it again and felt something in himself steady into a shape that would be hard to break. He found Sansa and told her the name, and she wrote it in the margin of a ledger because she could not bear to put it with deaths yet, and because margins hold secrets as well as accounts. At sunset, Ghost stiffened and growled, a sound so deep that the stones under Jon's feet seemed to notice. Men reached for weapon hilts as if the hilts had reached for them first. Above the tree line, the birds rose and went in a straight line toward the west. Jon moved to the wall with a purpose that made men follow him without knowing which of them had moved first. He saw then what Ghost had smelled, the cold made visible. It did not come like fog. Fog is careless. This came with intention. It poured along the ground and rose to shoulder height and then leveled itself out like a table a queen would not refuse to sit at. There were shapes in it. He could not say for sure that they were men. He could not say for sure that they were not the shadows of trees when a man has stared too long into distance. He could say nothing except that he did not want to see them and could not stop himself. Daenerys was already there, the wind at her hair and the thin white line on her thumb whiter. She said nothing to the men behind her because there was nothing to say that would not break on its way out of her mouth. She lifted her hand and made a small motion, and the dragons came, rising from where they had been fed and stroked and treated with cautious familiarity. Their wings took up the sky in pieces and returned it in other pieces, rearranged. The blue horizon swallowed its own breath. Rhaegal went first, his green scales darkened by the day's low light to a color that remembered forests. Drogon followed, black in answer to black. Their fire, her fire, went out in lines, in long separate lines because the air was so cold it could not hold a shape any more than a man could hold his temper with a hand thin as bone. The fire met the cold and made it scream. Men on the wall pressed their lips together to keep their teeth from chattering, not from cold but to forbid that particular applause. When the fire died down, they saw what the cold had been hiding. They saw figures standing at the edge of the warmed land. They saw spears. They saw the shapes of men who had once been grandfathers and boys. They saw a pattern burned into the snow in a line like the spine of a fish taken from its body. They saw, a long way off, not long enough, the shadow of a dragon that belonged to none of them, flying too low to be comfortable, cutting the air like a word that had learned to hate itself. "Not today," Jon said aloud without knowing it and without expecting to be obeyed. The cold answered him by holding its breath. Daenerys' face was set in a line that Jon recognized. The mouth of a woman who had learned that there was no advantage to letting a sob have her, that the sob could go on without her for a while and meet her on its way back when she had time for it. "We do what we can," she said, and in her voice there was a note like a small bell rung far away to tell a child that supper was ready. "We do it again. We make it our law." They did. The dragons went out and came back. Men brought bundles to the fires and carried them away again so that there would be wood for later, when later felt like a story an old woman told to a boy falling asleep in the corner of a room where the stew pot had been scraped clean and set upside down to glisten. Messages were written, sent, lost, caught, opened, read, folded, and tucked away. Blades were exchanged, remade, held, dropped, picked up again. Names were spoken. Names were lost. Names were collected and kept in a ledger because Sansa had decided there would be a ledger long after this. Cersei in the south drank wine and ate oranges and read the letters that came to her and said, "Not as bad as all that," while the hand at her chair tightened its fingers around the wood until the knuckles went white. She watched the winter in the north without the courtesy of astonishment. She held her breath when she wanted something and let it go when she had to, and the only man who could still read what that pause meant was too far to use the knowledge for anything but prayer. Jaime rode with a band of men who were not his men and used his skill at killing to keep alive a child who did not know him and an old woman who had seen the trident lick itself clean. He did not tell them his name. He had learned, too late, that some names are too hungry. In the Riverlands, the hound stumbled into a chapel that had no roof, stared at a fire built on the stones where men ate, lit candles once and said, "Show me, then, to the flames." He saw an island of blue ice floating in the middle of a field, circling as if a current caught it. He saw a woman with white hair whose face had learned patience so late that it had almost killed her. He saw a wolf sitting beside a man who had chosen honor over life and then chosen life after it had been taken away from him. He spat. He kept watching. He wanted to say to someone that he was a man who could not keep from suffering fools now that he had learned that a fool and a child are the same thing if you hold the light right. But there was no one there to hear him. He told the empty air anyway, and if the air smiled, it did it where he could not see. Winterfell became a place with too many rooms and not enough beds, with too much food and not enough, with too many names and not enough mouths to say them. It became the kind of place where men learned to see in the eyes of strangers the faces of people they had always known. It became the sort of place where somebody at any given hour was doing something kind and hoping no one noticed because noticing would make it harder to bear. It became a place that could be held because it had been held before, by men who had not had dragons and women who had not had ledgers and children who had not had onion stew. On a night when there was barely any moon and the snow fell in flakes so large that men held out their hands, irresistible children that they were, to catch one and see it. A cry went up not from the wall but from the yard. It was the sort of cry that comes when a person sees something they have expected to see at winter's edge all their life. Jon came running, Daenerys a step behind him, Ghost a white cloud. The gate was opening. A rider had come as far as the outer doors and then slid down from his saddle before the horse had quite stopped. He held something wrapped in thick cloth in his arms like a baby. He staggered. Men went to him and did not take the bundle because they knew what it meant to hold a thing so closely. The rider was Beric Dondarrion, and the look in his eyes was that of a man who had been convinced of his own death so thoroughly that being alive again felt like wearing someone else's boots. "It's not a baby," he said, because men always think in the same pictures. "It's a head." He knelt and he unwrapped the cloth, and he showed them a curved horn with bands of red gold worked with patterns so old they had become suggestions of themselves. "Found in a tomb of salt," he said. "Found under water that was not water. Found because a priestess told me I had to go up instead of down." He laughed, and it seemed to him that his laugh had finally caught up with him after days of running. "They say this horn remembers the sound of a dragon." Daenerys stood very still. The dragons behind her lifted their heads and made small noises, conspiratorial, as if remembering a joke two brothers had told each other in childhood. Jon looked at the horn and thought of the way sound moves in winter. He thought of the way a voice can travel along ice and arrive at a man's ear sounding like the voice of his father. He thought, "We are not done." He thought, "We were never meant to be done. Come inside." he said to Barak. Barak's eye sparked. Gladly, he said. It's cold out here. In the days that followed, men argued about the horn. They argued about whether blowing it would call to dragons or to dead men or simply to the cold itself, asking it to bring its worst sooner. They argued about whether horns with gold on them always meant one thing, and if so, what that one thing had meant to the first hands that had laid hold of this one. They argued because arguing was a human thing to do with the mouth when the mouth was not required for eating or kissing. They argued because if they did not argue, they would have to listen too closely to the noises that came from beyond the walls at night. The small, unpitying sounds of snow settling into its preferred shape. Daenerys held the horn in both hands and felt its weight, which was considerable, as if the horn had decided to be heavier than it looked out of a sense of mischief. She put her mouth to it once and did not blow. She felt the cold of the metal on her lips. She thought of Viserion's name and did not let herself say it because the mouth is a strange instrument and will cry if you ask it to say the wrong thing when it is already holding something back. She smiled, then at her own caution, and put the horn back on the table where they had laid maps that had already been changed by the wind. "We make our own sound," she said, and Jon, beside her, understood without needing her to explain that she meant the choices they would take, the steps they would put upon the snow as if it were a scarf long enough and warm enough for at least two of them, for a little while. He found Sansa again at a window where the frost had made little scrolls and flowers and those shapes Bran had spoken of. The same shapes, perhaps, because winter has its own language that it writes wherever it pleases. She had taken a pin from her hair and was tracing the air just above the glass, not touching it, making a mirror of what the cold had made. He watched her for a long minute. He did not disturb her. He let the slow beginning of whatever was coming be slow, the breath drawn before the horn, the quiet between the wing beats. He let the moment be itself, because that was what was left to them. To make room for the small truth of a moment, even as the great untruth of death pressed its nose against the window and fogged it with a breath that had never warmed a single room. The days troubled forward. The cold tried more tricks. It sent ahead of the main body of the dead a scattering of quiet that made men too proud to speak aloud feel tempted to confess their tenderness. The living answered by being more themselves. They told their children stories about foolish women with long scarves and men who had learned to boil onions into comfort and wolves who sat beside their masters because their masters had sat beside them first. They shored up doors again and again because doors are proud of failing but proud also of being repaired. They sharpened blades until the blades protested, and then they sharpened them again. On a twilight with a bruise at its heart, the horn sounded. No one had lifted it. Men were in the yard and in the hall, and some with their hands in a pot and a few with their heads bent to a child's laughter. No one had lifted the horn. It sounded like a ship's cry that had been waiting 1,000 years. It sounded like a mountain breathing. It sounded like a word that had always been in a man's mouth and had only now been persuaded to say itself. Jon and Daenerys and Sansa and Tyrion and Brienne and Grey Worm and Arya and Davos and Mira and Bran all lifted their heads together toward the sound like flowers toward light. Ghost threw back his head and howled once and then went silent, not because he had been cowed, but because the sound felt to him like something he would prefer to listen to rather than interrupt. And outside the walls, a dragon answered. It was not blue, not yet. The answer was a torn sound, a cry that had learned to remake itself in the air like cloth that mends mid-snap. It came from a distance that was either very far or very near, because some distances behave like that when winter deals them out. The answer bent. It grew strange. It died at the edges and then came back stubbornly to itself. Daenerys looked at Jon and Jon looked at Daenerys and they both looked at Bran. And Bran said in a voice calm and old, "He is coming to hear whether the horn is his name. Let us not teach him it is," Sansa said, and moved to take the horn into her hands because someone had to, and because she had learned to move when others were inclined to suffer the question. The cold pressed itself closer against the stones like a child pretending to be part of the wall. Jon felt it. He lifted his sword, not for battle yet, but as one lifts a thing that has become more than itself. The living held their breath. The dead took one. The horn lay on the table, heavy and quiet, pretending to be only what it looked like. The dragons stirred. The wolf's ears pricked. The boy in the hall who had been staring too long at the well forgot the well for a minute and tugged at his own sleeve to be sure he felt it there. And the night thickened just enough to let in a story.